So today we're going to take a look at the Revopoint Pop 2 3D scanner. All right, so let's just unbox this thing. This scanner apparently has a 0.3 millimeter resolution, and I think it's about 8 frames per second, this particular model. The package was labeled as coming with a turntable, and I know that they offer a bunch of accessories as well. I was checking out the site there. They have a turntable that kind of does multi-dimensions so that you don't have to flip your part over and over. And so I'm going to be drawing a lot of comparisons probably to the Creality scanner that we reviewed a little while ago now, but one of our past videos there, check that out so that you know what I'm referring to. But they're, in the same, well, not in the same ballpark. They're the same form factor, same size. There's definitely a different cost variance between the two of them, this being the more expensive of the two by quite a bit. So it's not going to be a fair comparison, but at least we have a frame of reference for what I would be comparing it to rather than comparing it to absolutely nothing. At the end of the day, I'm most interested in how easy it is to use and how accurate and effective that reconstruction of the point cloud that it makes as it's scanning the object as it rotates. I had a little bit of difficulty superimposing the multiple perspectives that we scanned on the Creality and making a good cohesive model out of it without losing quality if things weren't perfectly lined up, right? So we have a little foam kind of card here with a bunch of dots on it, and it looks like a little stand on the back. We have the user manual, which I will absolutely be reading. There's a small tripod, almost identical to the Creality one that we saw before, and it also looks like it has height adjustment. Let's see, somewhere here. Yep, there we go. It's a height adjustment. This little baggie looks almost like a leatherette pad with little dots. So I've seen these dots on other printers, I've seen these dots on other scanners. I think the Banana 3D we had back when, you had to place the dots so it had points of reference on the object to kind of keep track of where the object was moving in 3D space. And I don't think they're needed all the time. Sometimes they're only needed when the surface is glossy, or as we've seen in the past, we had some sprays that made a glossy surface matte and then disappeared after a few minutes, almost made it chalky so that the light wasn't reflecting off of the shiny surfaces. If you've ever used one of those laser thermometers, it's kind of the same idea. If you shoot that at a shiny surface, you're not really measuring that surface, you're measuring whatever it bounced off that shiny surface. So there's different ways of compensating for that. We have the actual scanner itself, and this is hefty. I'd say probably 3 large chocolate bars. This is exactly what it weighs. So I don't know, 150, 200 grams or so, but it feels substantial in your hand. And I'm gonna try not to get my fingerprints all over the lens there. And on the back, there's like a play button. We have a micro USB 3. So it's kind of the 2-piece micro USB connector. And then there's the little shoe that slides into there. And of course, I touched the lens already, so I have to give that a wipe down. I'm sure one of those things or a cloth or something for that. And then we've got, so it's a USB-A to USB-C cable. And much like the Creality, they also gave us a model. Again, it's another bust, slightly different bust. But the idea here is to show the level of detail that it's able to capture. And there, so we've got it's a proprietary kind of end connector. I haven't seen one like this before. But so it's a USB, it's a micro USB 3 connector. But much like the the old monitor cables, it's got 2 screw-in connectors on the side, so that it doesn't actually come loose from the back of the unit. That's really nice, especially micro USB connectors. I'm not a fan typically because they are so prone to kind of wiggling and coming loose. So that's actually kind of really cool. And I wish I had that on a couple of the ones I have at home, to be honest. Obviously, the back of the unit has to have the facility to, to support the 2 screw-in ports. But so there's that. And on the other end, it's again USB-C. So I'm seeing a lot of USB-C. If you don't have USB-C on your computer, then you can get an adapter that takes your USB-A on the computer and makes it a female USB-C, so you can plug it in there. But there's likely a requirement for it to be a USB 3 port and a USB 3 adapter as well. So just be conscious of that if you are going that route. And so we have another one of these. They've given us both options. Perfect, I spoke too soon. So this one is USB-C to their proprietary connector, and this is your standard USB-A. Blue, meaning it's intended to be USB 3. So that's cool. You actually don't need an adapter, so just completely ignore me there. And this smaller one has both C and A. That's interesting. I'll read in the manual what the intended use of that is. It is USB 3, but having both connectors seems interesting if we can do it all over one, right? So that's just about it. There's one last piece in the box here. It looks like a riser. Oh, interesting. So they've, your little shoe attachment that's on the bottom of the scanner, they've given you, the ability to lock it in here, but then it's got your standard tripod mount. So, the tripods we're using here, you'll be able to screw that into your standard tripod. So you're not bound to this, even though it does have a proprietary way of attaching. They've given you that adaptability, which is really nice. Why does it have a thing in here? Oh, what is this? Clamp? You can clamp it onto something? Okay. Oh. Okay, that's why. So it seems like with these two little rubber kind of shoes in here that you could clamp this onto something. It's like spring loaded. So maybe if you're using a tripod for whatever reason wasn't convenient, you might have the ability to clamp this onto something. Again, I'm gonna be reading the manual. So if I figure out it's something else, I'll let you know. Okay guys, I screwed up. In my screen recording, it clipped the right-hand side of the program. So I'm just going to show you what pieces of the stream you missed, right? On the right-hand side, we see the color preview in the top right there. That's this color preview here of the guy. In the bottom right, you see the IR preview, so that's what the camera is seeing. And then when we are loading a model, so if I reload the head model here from the video, sorry, head 2, the newest, and go open. Okay. When we are in here, we have the play button. That's to start another scan session. So if I hit play, it's going to try and align this up with the other one. I'll just hit stop, that's fine. When you hit stop, you have the options of completing or restarting from scratch or doing the point cloud. I wasn't doing the point cloud, so I would just hit complete. And then we have the fuse point cloud options here. This is where I was talking about the pitch, so that's the level of detail. So once you fuse the point cloud, your other option here is the mesh settings. So it's on auto right now. So there's a mesh quality and the denoise. The denoise is the smoothing I talk about. And then the option to fill the holes, which I wanted to have turned on. And then you hit that button, which repairs a lot of this and repairs the floating little islands there. So sorry about that, but at least you know what you're about to miss in this segment here. Okay, so I've installed the software from their website and double clicking the software. In this case, I'm on Windows 10. I'm presented with this kind of guide. I've also rearranged some of the equipment on the table here. So this little mat here in the videos that you'll see on their website, on YouTube there, they've got this on like underneath the item. They've also got a turntable that has the same pattern on it. So I'm just gonna kind of use this as a poor man's turntable, if you will, and I'll spin it around myself. It leads you through, what the focal range is, depending on what version of the camera you have, some tips about shiny objects, which I kind of mentioned before. You have a few options there. And then you can, powderize them or spray them to make them not glossy so that it's not reflective. And then just links to the manuals and the website and whatnot. In the top right here, we see the camera's color preview of what we're looking at. And the red little crosshairs, because I've left them on, is where you want your item to be. Now across the top, you'll see how far it is. So right now it says we're good, but you really want to be in the excellent range. So as we move into excellent, there we go. I might want to reposition the camera down a little bit and maybe somewhere like there. So now I'm only gonna get like the top, maybe half of him. So I'll do one cycle of that, and then I'll pause it, and then we'll reposition him, and then it should pick up the orientation change and overlay the two different scans one on top of the other. So the other thing that I did mention, or that I noticed in the manual rather, is that the exposure, they say to set it to auto until it's about ready to scan, and then set it to manual so that it's not changing the exposure if the lighting in your environment changes. That was their suggestion for the best result. And then here is the, I believe this is like the IR view of things. So this is actually what the camera is using for its sensing. And then there's the preview of it. So if I hit scan, it's gonna ask me, what do I want to call my model? I'm just leaving the generic thing here. Maybe I'll call it head. Where I'm gonna place it, I've made a folder for that. And then I'm gonna do a high accuracy scan, and I'm gonna do features. So this is if you wanna capture like the details of it. If you're using the markers, those little dots, then it's a marker scan. I did see as well that you can put the little dots on the surface around what you're scanning to help it learn what that plane that it's sitting on is. I'm not gonna use either of those, and there's only so many markers there, so I wanna kind of keep them for future. And I'm sure they're probably interchangeable, or at least maybe I'm assuming they are. So we'll leave that on features. And then in this case, I could capture like color texture, and I can't export that as STL. I have to export that as OBJ, I believe, to keep the color information. But in this case, it's white anyway, so I'm just gonna do no color. Okay. So now our preview windows are on the left here. There's the depth. Anything that shows up in red in the depth is not going to be scanned. So if I increase the brightness of the LEDs, eventually, there we go, that red stuff is like too reflective. So if you have a dark object, you might have to increase the intensity. Obviously this is white and kind of pale, and we have good lighting in here, so we could leave this lower. I'll probably leave it maybe around 2. If it's blue, it's essentially too under illuminated, so too dark, so maybe about there. Now remove plane, it should detect what the ground plane is and automatically remove that for you. We'll see how that goes. In this case, we have dots, so it should be pretty obvious what that ground plane is. And then over here, we hit play. So we have 3 seconds before it's gonna actually start recording. So I'll hit play. And then just trying to keep my fingers, see how it's picking up my fingers in the top left there? I'm gonna try to keep my fingers out of the view. Oops. And keep him in the center and try to keep it close enough that it's showing as excellent. And there doesn't seem to be a way to actually process the individual frames. So what I've seen in other scanners before is we had kind of a running timeline of all the, in this case, 368 frames that I've recorded, and I could pick and choose which frames I didn't want to be in there. So that one's got my finger, remove that 1 frame or 5 frames or however many that was. Here I don't have that ability. Now, after I've created a 3D model of this, I might be able to slice those unwanted pieces out, but to not have to do that, I'd rather start with as clean of a scan as possible. It's also kind of difficult here to keep this guy in the center. And moving this around by hand has its own challenges because I'm looking off to the side while I'm trying to keep my hand-eye coordination over here. That's where that phone mount might come in handy because you can actually see the preview right on the scanner itself. So I'll reposition this. I'm going to stop this and just restart because I'm going to start from scratch. We'll hit scan again, put in a new, we'll call this head 2, what have you, head 1. Same options, hit OK. And then I'm going to find something to like raise this up on so that maybe I can like spin it around by hand underneath, like a bottle or something. So I'll be back. Well, I've got a bottle of almost empty folic acid, that'll do. I'm going to put this up here and create the poor man's turntable. There. So now at least I can spin this in a circle without getting my hands in the frame. And then I'm gonna have to up this guy a little bit and change the angle there. So there we go. All right, so we'll do the upper half, the lower half, and then we'll change his orientation. So let's try this again. One thing I did notice over other printers that other scanners that I've used is the frame rate on this is way faster. Whoop, maybe getting too close. Yeah, too close. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll pause that. So just hit pause here, and then I can now I want to keep an overlap there with what I've done. So see how I'm going up to about his ear, so that it can kind of find a good point of reference on his lower hairline to line up these shots with the previous shots. So hopefully that happens. It'll look a little squirrely at first, I suspect, right? And then there we go. So now it's found it. And then now that it's found it, I should be able to even lower this a bit more. There. Okay. So focused. Okay. Pause that. And then just for fun, I'm going to try like a different orientation here. So this way, when he comes around, we'll be able to get a good shot of the top of his head and the bottom of the model there. And any of these like steep underhangs, you know, his nostrils, that kind of stuff, we'll get a totally different angle on him. And I'm just going to move him back just a little bit, because I suspect as we rotate around to here, it's going to be pretty close. Okay. So doing it in segments like this is going to be helpful, because if for some reason I start scanning and it can't kind of find that alignment, I can just revert back this portion of the scan, this play pause segment of that scan session. So I play again. There we go. So it found the track. You can see it said lose track at the bottom, and now we're good again. We do have a couple little islands that are showing up there. I did notice that as well in some of my other attempts here. It's picking up some of the dots as if they're raised on the platform, which is a little bit weird. We're still good from a distance perspective. Okay, let's just stop there. Okay, I'm gonna hit stop because I think I'm good. I'm not going to fuse the point cloud yet, so that means kind of make all the dots that it's collected into a solid structure. I'm just going to hit complete so that I can kind of preview this. So you do see some blockiness like on the ears and under the eyebrows. Like I said, those dots that it's picked up as if they were raised off the bed, which isn't the case. So we'll see what sort of sorcery it can do here when we fuse the point cloud. The manual does say the lowest point pitch you can go is 0.1 millimeters. This is essentially the level of detail you're going to reconstruct when you fuse this cloud. So going up here would be obviously less detailed. If you had a very simple object like a cube or something, maybe that's acceptable. And your only penalty by going as detailed as possible is the reconstruction time. So I'll set it like that and close, and then I'll hit this button here. Speaking of the reconstruction time, I did notice by going to the task manager, right here, we can see it's using 100% of my CPU, but it's not using the GPU. It would have been nice to have some degree of hardware acceleration. I mean, even your standard web browser now, typically even your browser on your computer uses some degree of hardware acceleration these days. It's not, CUDA, like specifically tailored to like an NVIDIA GPU, or ATI's equivalent, which I forget what it's called these days. We can even see here, Revopoint is using GPU 1, which is my secondary GPU. It's not even my NVIDIA GPU. So it's just using Intel GPU in this case, where if it was doing actual heavy lifting, it would flip over to the proper GPU. If you start a video game or something, it's immediately going to use GPU 0. But it's not GPU accelerated, it's just CPU. Well, it crashed on me. Luckily, it keeps in the model list, it keeps all your attempts at scans, So we can see head 2, and I can reload this guy. I think I just go open. See, that's weird. So when you reloaded the model, it should have been at this stage where I could, fuse the point cloud again. It didn't do that. And now it actually seems like this model, now that I've loaded it, has more artifacting than where it left off when I just scanned. We'll try it anyway. We'll see what happens here. So I've got it all the way highest definition I can. Let it fuse, and just for fun, I'm going to watch the CPU usage. For reference, this CPU is a 7th gen i7, 3-point-something gigahertz, 32 gigs of RAM, and it's got a GeForce 1080 Ti. Might not be a Ti. Not that that matters, because as I said, it's not using hardware acceleration for this. So we'll give it a few seconds, and we'll see how long it takes, and hopefully we're left with something presentable. Well, fusing's completed. It took about 2 minutes, and we can see it's not ideal. So those little dots from the base plate there are now 3D objects in our model, and we have all these tiny little holes. So let's, over here, we can fill the holes, and we can crank the mesh quality, and then denoising. So I think the more you crank denoising, the less detail you'll have. And I'm just essentially leaving it at auto in this case, but I want to fill the holes. So hopefully it fills some of the holes in his face. Based on what I see so far though, I suspect that I'm going to have to do this again. And the fact that I couldn't just load the model and start manipulating the model without doing another quick scan session, it shouldn't have picked up any dots, any point cloud pieces of this model because it's not pointing at anything, but that could have introduced noise as well. I should have probably backed out that 36 frames or something that the last one was. And as we can see on the screen, this is made up of about 3.09 million points in this cloud. Another thing worth mentioning here, like I said, I watched all the videos. One of their videos points to this kind of rough sandpapery textured effect on the model, and that can be a sign that you need to calibrate your scanner. In the past, other scanners that I've received had a calibration file from the factory that you would load that's unique to that particular piece of hardware. There was no need to recalibrate over time. Well, at least that's what they said. I don't believe. Any precision piece of equipment typically needs periodic calibration of sorts. So it was nice to see that they had a whole video on how to use this base plate specifically with its kickstand as a means of calibrating. So these dots mean something to that scanner. You scan it in multiple different orientations following their 5-step process, and the sandpapery effect of your model from a scan perspective won't occur. So this is smooth and it should scan smooth. So I suspect we need to calibrate the scanner. When I looked for that software to have it preloaded here, the software is still under development. So as you can see here, after denoising the model, it's smoother, he doesn't have holes anymore. It looks like a head, generally. It is smoother from the perspective that it lost a bunch of details. It also got rid of all those erroneous little dots that were floating in the sky, so that's good to see. However, enhance. We can see the orange peel effect of his face. And that's not here. While my face might look like that, his is smooth. So we do have some degree of the effect that calibration is supposed to resolve, still visible in the model. And you don't want to keep smoothing it to try to get rid of that because you're losing detail with every time you smooth. And what's the point of having a high resolution, down to 0.1 millimeter resolution scanner if you're just going to smooth the heck out of it? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm not sure if I mentioned it already, but I'm not entirely convinced I know what the resolution of the scanner is from a detail perspective. The box said one thing, the manual said another, online literature says a third. So it could be 0.1, it could be 0.2, it could be 0.05. I honestly have no idea. But if we're gonna have to keep smoothing, all of that's kind of irrelevant anyway. So off camera, I did another set of scans. The bottom of them looks a little weird because I didn't actually scan this perspective and care about getting the bottom. I scanned the face probably 4 separate sessions and then combined them in that point cloud just to see if I could capture a greater degree of detail. And while it did capture more detail, if we look at his eyes, I've got a much greater degree of detail in the eye here. So you can see where the bottom eyelid even matches the eye and the top piece of the eyelid here. But what I still have is that orange peel effect all over him. And as you've seen here, even just in the scanning, I wasn't able to load the model and just finish fusing the point cloud and smoothing it and whatnot. I had to actually start another scan and then stop the scan, and then I could complete the model. So while the hardware seems more responsive than other hardware like the Creality, it's definitely way more frames per second than the Creality scanner had, the software is lacking. In some cases, like calibration, it's non-existent. In other cases, it crashes in the middle. It's overly smoothing in this case. And then this effect that we have here, I don't know if that's the scanner, I suspect, or the software. In Windows 11, don't even try running the software. You'll barely even get a scan started and it immediately crashes. And when it crashes, it just shuts off. It's not like there's an error message or anything to go on. So the software needs to come a long way. I hope we get to a point where, much like a home scanner for paper, you could use anybody's software once you've got the drivers for the scanner. That would be really nice, because from a hardware perspective, I like it, and I want to like it, but a combination of their instructions, the materials that they provide you, and the lack of information about those materials, such as this. It's kind of like a textured plastic sheet. And just by looking at YouTube videos and whatnot, I've seen that people have draped this kind of over the backdrop to black out whatever's in the backdrop so that it doesn't get scanned. Others have scanned stuff on top of here, but it's not, even mentioned in the literature that I've read, or on any of the videos that I've watched on their YouTube page. So I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air. I'm gonna need to get some more time with it. We'll definitely reach out to support about the calibration issue, about what we've experienced in the software, and if there's anything meaningful to report back, maybe in the future we'll do an update video. So unfortunately, I can't draw any real conclusions, but you've seen what I've seen, you can draw your own. Hopefully that was useful. Remember, like and subscribe, and if you want to get notified, ring that bell down below. Thanks for watching.